We're back for another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly here on WCTV. I'm Caleb Yager alongside Austin Bechtold. The fall sports seasons are almost completely all finished, except with the exception of football. We're moving into winter sports, but we're going to wrap up some fall sports. But let's go with football first. It was a tough loss, Austin, on Saturday against the Geneva Golden Tornadoes.
Yeah, 49-3. Now on a 5-game losing streak for this Waynesburg football team. And Trevor Miller threw 5 interceptions, no touchdown passes. The only scoring coming on a 33-yard field goal by Keegan Robbie. This is a team that is just struggling without Tyler Raines, and the defense is being put in bad positions because of the turnovers that are being created by the offense. And whenever you're able to have that, and the crazy thing about it is 476 yards on the ground for Geneva. That was a Golden Tornado rushing attack, indeed, that just annihilated through the Waynesburg defense. That really didn't give the Yellow Jackets much of a chance on the road.
Oh, they did not. And speaking of rushing, looking at Waynesburg rushing, I mean, Justin Flack was really the one who carried the Yellow Jackets. He had 80 yards, positive yards, but 56 net yards with 24 yards. 24 yards on the negative side of things. It was just a rough day, and I was there to call the game with Jeremiah Miller, and it was rough to say the least, and I think they're going to have to turn things around before their next game against Bethany, Austin.
Yeah, 1-7 overall, 1-6 in the PAC. This is really going to be the best chance, I think, against Bethany to be able to get a win in the last 2 games with W&J on the road, one of the most prolific teams in the PAC, despite a loss to Westminster. So this is going to be a must-win game, really, for Waynesburg to try to get some positivity in the back half of the schedule and the last home game as well.
Mm-hmm. And going over to Waynesburg women's soccer, the men's soccer and volleyball seasons are done. They did not go into the playoffs, but women's soccer, their season has ended too, but they went into the first round of the playoffs to face W&J, a heartbreaking double overtime loss, 1-0 against the Presidents.
Yeah, but I think Coach George DiAugustino has got to be pretty proud of his squad. They really put up a good effort. They won that game 7-1 to be able to get into the playoffs as well, at the top 6 teams making it. So I think that there's good progress with this program. We saw a lot of good things, especially late, and if you can finish strong, that's one thing that volleyball wasn't able to do. Started out a little bit strong and didn't really finish the way that they wanted to. But for women's soccer, I think definitely some positive signs, especially DiAugustino's first season. So to be able to build more of a culture and have some of the younger players that really started to develop this season be able to be molded a little bit more going into future years, I think this sets up for a good stretch that we could see from the women's soccer team moving forward.
And the Waynesburg women's soccer team missing the playoffs for a stretch of years under the heat heises. But George DiAugustino, like you said, first year making it to the playoffs. I think this team has a very, very bright future ahead of them. Now we're going to go over to wrestling, which started off its season on Saturday on the orange and black wrestle-offs. And we got some newcomers and some returners that are looking pretty impressive for the Yellow Jackets.
We do. One of those newcomers, Seth Evans, really stepped up and put up an impressive performance, someone that we're familiar here in the communications department. Dylan Winters also had a good appearance as well, and it's just good to see some of these winter sports start to get in action a little bit, Caleb. It's kind of a sign of the times of we keep moving forward and moving on with the rest of the season this year, and as we start to get to now the beginning of November, we're going to have basketball coming up, but wrestling, I think it's just important to just see how some of these newcomers are able to fare, and I think it's going to be an exciting season for them as well.
And Rocky McGeary, one of the biggest names on the Waynesburg wrestling team, he's got another guy on the team named Garrett Cook, a transfer from Division II West Liberty, that could be giving a serious impact for the Yellow Jackets. And speaking of the Yellow Jackets, congratulations to the women's cross country team on Saturday. They won their 6th PAC title in a row. What a stretch for the Yellow Jackets they have done over the years. The men's team did not win the championship, but they placed 5th out of 9 teams on Saturday. But just a great day overall for cross country for the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets.
Indeed, 6 straight. That's the definition of a dynasty right there. Just edging out Franciscan. Congratulations, really, to the women's cross country team. Really, just the dominant force in sports here at Waynesburg, and they represented well. And going to be able to go see what they can do in the Division III championships coming up in a couple of weeks. It's going to be very interesting. Aubrey Wingard performed very well and was really the leader of the pack for this cross-country team, and a lot of other good performances as well. It's really just a collective effort, as it's been in the last couple of years, to be able to continue to keep the crown home and remain on top.
And as the women's cross-country team was waiting for results, it was a little nerve-wracking because they beat Franciscan team-wise by only 1 point.
1 point.
They couldn't get any closer than that, but like you said, Aubrey Wingart, second overall, Gloria Reed finishing 5th overall in the race. But both teams go to the Division III Mid-East Regional Championships on November 13th, so that could be a good event coming up for both of these teams.
Yeah, it should be another opportunity to be able to prove themselves, especially for this women's cross-country team that continues really to dominate. Expecting some good things. We also saw sophomore Gabrielle Rest-Snyder have a good performance as well. Really is the third member of that group with Reed and Wingart. So looking forward to what they can do, especially on this national stage.
And whenever we come back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, we're going to be talking about football with our analyst, Joe Venzel. Watching Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and here to talk about Waynesburg football, our analyst Joe Venzel. And Joe, we're going to have to talk about the elephant in the room, the hard loss on Saturday to the Geneva Golden Tornadoes.
Yeah, 49-3 coming into this one. Tough loss, especially they were getting things started there in the first half, putting up solid plays to their players that they needed to, especially with Justin Flack getting a little bit on the ground with 55 yards, but that does different to Geneva's 476 rushing yards with the triple option. And especially you're going to get that much of a difference, not going to be good for the rest of the game, and especially when your quarterback, Trevor Miller, second collegiate start, not his best, but 5 interceptions is going to turn into points for the Geneva Golden Tornadoes, in which they did effectively.
You alluded to Miller's performance, 6 completions for a total of 66 yards. What do you think has to happen for him to be able to just get some confidence under his belt?
Definitely try. Don't stop. Don't stop throwing, because once you stop, you've lost confidence. And if you keep doing the plays that they have been, especially with Dakota Romantino not getting the targets that he wanted last game. But, with those other receivers, Trenton Kearns, Matt Craig, those guys coming into Bethany next week, if you can get those receivers open and make those plays don't stop throwing and keep the run game effective, I think that he'll have a good amount of confidence, especially with already he has an amount of confidence with this first collegiate start back into St. Vincent, hitting Dakota Romantino for 11 catches, 142 yards. So we can see what Trevor Miller can do, but if he can get back into that rhythm and get going with this team, I feel like he can really do some damage in these next couple of weeks.
Now, the interesting thing that the Yellow Jackets did on Saturday is they brought out a wildcat formation with Justin Flack, using him a lot during that game. But the thing is, as the game progressed, it seemed like it worked better as the game progressed, and you would think the opposite would happen. What do you think about this Wildcat thing?
I love it, especially when you can use different people in different positions, especially at the Wildcat position. You have a great run game with your original running back, Justin Flack, and you can get your other receivers and other players involved in this new offensive scheme, catch opponents off guard. That's what's really going to turn around this program, especially, catch them off guard, get a couple points going, and get a rhythm with, your offense. I love it. I love a Wildcat, and I love us taking chances with it.
Joe, this is the Waynesburg team that has lost now 5 games in a row, gave up 49 points to Geneva. Have you seen any positive signs from this defense, though, this season?
I have, and especially in that Geneva game, we have freshman linebacker Samuel Hamilton with 10 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. And especially on the cornerback side with Brandon Tyson these past few games, walking up some very good receivers in this PAC. And, I love the defensive line for this Waynesburg too as well. Sean Hitler putting up a couple stacks in the St. Vincent game and the Geneva game, and with those veteran guys essentially coaching those younger guys, I love to see the progression of this young Waynesburg defense.
What are some of the adjustments now for the defensive side of things that they're going to have to make? They've been giving up 66 points, 39 points, 40, whatever points. What are some of the adjustments that they have to make before going into Saturday's match?
Yeah, no, and another fact for that, Caleb, 359 points they've let up all season, and especially to turn around in this Bethany game next week, you really have to stop the big plays, stop the run, especially with Geneva putting up 500 on your defense, and get those young guys, get those old guys, especially with the veterans coaching these young guys. I feel like it'll be very good progression to end out the season strong.
We're now getting really late into the season, only 2 games remaining, W&J coming up after the last home game of the year against Bethany. What have you seen from this team overall that you've liked the most that maybe some other people would not have noticed?
Definitely starting off the first half very well with different scores. If either that be a touchdown or a field goal. Their opening drive with the first and second quarter in the first half, they're a very good team. Putting offensive drives together, figuring out the defense that they need to. But the second half, obviously not Waynesburg's strong suit, as they had let up 359 points, like I said earlier. And, if you get that full game, full 4 quarters experience, playing your heart out and doing everything that you do right, I feel like that's the adjustment that they need to make for Bethany and going to have the big game against W&J.
Thank you very much, Joe Venzel. We're talking women's soccer when we come back with Tyler Zeman on Jacket Sports Weekly.
It's a Saturday night. You know what that means. Time to party. Sam is having a good time, watching sports, drinking beer, playing Pong. Not a care in the world for Sam. Nobody at the party stopped Sam. They let him walk out the door with his keys, even though he was stumbling, having a hard time to stand up. What happened less than 10 minutes later would change Sam's life forever.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. Now joined by our women's soccer expert, Tyler Zeman, to break down the run that the team had in the back half of the season to make the PAC playoffs. Tyler, thanks for coming on. How did this team get it done to be able to clinch the last spot in the playoffs and be able to face W&J?
Well, they got it done by winning their last 3 games. They had a nice tie against W&J, went into 2 overtimes. Then they had a bad loss, but they were able to bounce back with 3 wins, which is something in soccer. When you have momentum and you have good form, it can really go a long way. And we saw that last week whenever they played Geneva, a game they had to win to clinch the playoffs. And boy, did they get it done. A 7-1 win with 5 goals coming in the second half, just 12 minutes apart from each other. That's just, confidence right there. They started out slow in the first half. They did concede first, which is something that they've struggled to really bounce back from throughout the season. When they go down early, they tend to not be able to come back, but they were able to respond with 2 goals to end the first half, and then really the second half, Geneva was nowhere. They could not get into the Yellow Jacket territory. They had little to no shots, and Haley Johnson, the freshman, just really took over this game. 4 total goals, which made her end with 11 on the season. That's just very impressive.
Now going over to the W&J game, heartbreaking loss, especially in the first round of the playoffs, 1-0 in double overtime. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, it's the second time these 2 teams went into double overtime this season. They're very familiar with each other, and it was all W&J. They mainly dominated throughout the regular time, and then obviously in overtime, Waynesburg in the first portion of overtime just had no shots, really couldn't get any momentum going, and then going into the second overtime, W&J just came out fast with a goal that really came out of nowhere, and all it takes is one, especially with this game when they already tied 0-0 earlier in the season. You knew it was going to come down to 1 shot, and that's what happened.
So, Tyler, tell us with Coach George DiAgostino's first season how you think that he did really be able to build up this program to be able to make the playoffs and really the potential that they have moving forward.
Well, I think it's a great start. I think it was a great hire, and I think it just shows that in the spring season, this team wasn't actually as bad as their record may have shown. I think it was really just a lack of coaching. They had some pieces starting to come together, and now with this freshman striker, Haley Johnson, leading from the front, and Coach DiAugustino in his first season making the playoffs. I think that's very, very impressive, and it's something that they can build off of.
Well, Tyler, thanks for joining us and recapping the women's soccer season, and the potential that they could have moving forward could be special. But coming up, we're going to talk about a team that accomplished some very good things, the PAC Championships cross country with Riley Holsinger, coming up here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
The PAC Cross Country Championships were this past Saturday, and what an event it was. The PAC champions, once again, the women's cross country team from Waynesburg University, and here to break down Saturday's showcase is our analyst, Riley Holsinger, but it was a really, really close call. They beat out Franciscan team-wise by 1 point.
Yeah, it was just kind of crazy how close the competition was there on Saturday afternoon. And even head coach Chris Hardie really wasn't sure that his team was going to be in the position to win until after he heard that announcement. He ended up telling me that he thought his team was shy of winning the PAC championship. He thought the team was going to finish in second place, but the cards ended up dealing the way in Waynesburg's favor here, and Waynesburg women's cross country. 6 straight PAC titles, just a really impressive thing. But it really took a whole team effort on Saturday. You might have your Aubrey Wingerts and your Gloria Reeds who will finish 2nd and 5th respectively. Those two are always going to consistently be those great runners for you in this women's cross country team. But to win a PAC title, it really comes down to the full team performance here, and everybody really stepped up in this PAC meet on Saturday afternoon. Gabby Reef-Snyder had arguably the most impressive race to me that I saw on Saturday, finishing 10th. She really stepped up for this team when they needed her most. Joel Anderson finishing 16th out there. She had a really solid run, as well as Monica Klinsick rounding out the top in the scoring 5, finishing 22nd. So all around, even the people that didn't score for this team had some pretty solid performances for this women's cross country team, which led to them getting 6 straight PAC titles.
Riley, every championship is built different. What do you think is the storyline for this team? What's their legacy compared to other championship teams here at Waynesburg?
I think one of the biggest things is dealing with all of the challenges, and it's not just the championship schools that have to deal with it. It's all of these teams. You have to deal with challenges such as COVID-19 right now, and I think that's a big thing, not having probably your normal practice schedule, the normalcy to say the very least with the team here. And then you also have the other challenges that pop up. You have injuries and then some other team related stuff, whether if it's morale or just anything else. So I think it's the biggest thing when you look at every championship team, how they were able to navigate those challenges. But I think the COVID-19 one's probably a really big challenge that this team had to really navigate, like a lot of other schools around.
Now talk to us about the men's cross country team that finished 5th out of 9 teams on Saturday.
The men's cross country team really impressed me at this meet. They only had 1 scoring junior and no seniors scored for this team. So it's a very young men's cross country team out here, and they were very impressive. So the future to me looks very bright for this men's cross country team. We had Andrew Casper, he finished 12th. He's been stellar all year. Nolan Curran really caught my eye. He ended up finishing 20th, being named as an honorable mention to the All-PAC team. He had a solid race, and then junior Jack Coakley finished 16th as well. So all around, this men's team, very young team, but a bright future ahead of them. And I look for them to maybe win a PAC title in a couple of years, depending on the recruiting classes brought in.
What are your expectations for the Mid-East Regional Championships coming up on November 13th for both these programs?
So this is going to be a really big event here. I don't know if Waynesburg will do as well as a team as they did in the PAC Championships, obviously. But I'm going to look to see if Aubrey Wingert can qualify for nationals. She's done it before, obviously. So the biggest thing is to see if she can do it again. This is already a course that she's ran this season at the Dickinson Short Long Invitational at Big Spring High School. So the course is familiar to her. But the biggest thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Gloria Reed, to see if she'll be one of those runners that could potentially qualify for nationals, because she definitely has the talent to do so, but she'd probably be a little bit more on the fringe, whereas Aubrey's one of those runners that would probably be more of a sure bet to end up being in nationals. So keep an eye on Gloria Reed.
Thank you very much, Riley, for your analysis on the cross-country teams. But the winter sports are in the air here at Waynesburg University. We're going to be talking about wrestling when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. The Waynesburg University wrestling team began their season in the orange and black wrestle-offs held at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse this past Saturday. And here to break it all down is our wrestling expert, Brock Owens. Brock, what do you make of the team's performance and their first appearance really this year?
Well, I liked what I saw out of them. They looked in pretty good shape out there. They were wrestling hard, and there was a couple of guys that, honestly, I was pretty excited to see out there. Some new guys, some freshmen. There was a few transfers in there, one in specific in Garrett Cook that looked really good. And I'm pretty excited for the wrestling team. Historically, or at least over the last decade or so, the wrestling team's been one of the best sports on campus as far as success goes. So I think they can continue it. Maybe, some guys are definitely going to have to step up for them to be as good as they have been the last couple years. Of course, last year they didn't really have a season. They only had one match. But as far as the last couple seasons go, they're going to need a couple guys to step up to really be able to be as good as they have been. But I'm excited to see what this team can bring this year.
And speaking of that last match, it was on Friday, February 12th of 2021. How much rust is this team going to have to shake off for this season?
Well, it's definitely going to be a lot of rust. But at the same time, there is a bunch of other teams out there that have to shake off that same amount of rust. So when you look at it, it's going to, in the beginning of the season, I think a lot of endurance and heart and toughness are going to come into it, maybe a little more than they already do, which wrestling is all about that, like all the time. But in the beginning of this season specifically, where, only a couple of matches really in the last long time, over a year probably, yeah, that's going to come into it a lot. And from what I saw from this team, a lot of them are in pretty good shape to start the year.
Who's someone on the team that you think, in your opinion, has the potential for a breakout season this year and really catches your eye as someone that can make an impact?
I'm going to have to say two guys. Number one, I would have to go with Alex Coppolo. He is a sophomore. He didn't really get to wrestle as a freshman because last year as a freshman, obviously, they didn't really have much. In that one match against Garrett College, he got a pin in that match. And I think he can be very solid this sophomore season. And then a freshman I want to talk about would be Seth Evans. He's won the wrestle-off for 157. He won 7-2 over a solid sophomore, Kyle Heinerman. And he's in very good condition. He even went outside of practice. I was talking to him. Of course, we know Seth Evans. He's a good friend of the comm department here. So he runs all the time. Outside of practice, inside of practice, he goes hard. I like what he can bring to the table and maybe could have a pretty good freshman year.
Now, the next match for the Waynesburg wrestling team is at the Ned McGinley Invitational Tournament at King's College, known to be a pretty competitive match for a lot of teams in the region. So what are they going to have to do on Saturday in order to make the best out of this tournament?
Well, it's definitely going to have to be a team effort. I don't know if they're going in expecting to win or not, but at least trying to get a high place, because that's what you're always trying to do, obviously. It's going to be a team effort. Guys like Dylan Winters is going to have to step up. He came back from wrestling after a couple years off. He won the 125 wrestle-off. He got 2 pins in the orange and black wrestle-offs. And some of the guys I already talked about, Garrett Cook, Luke Levanway is another good one. He only lost to Garrett Cook 6-4, so he's up there with him. So there's a lot of guys that can step up and are going to have to if they're going to be able to compete in this tournament.
Brock, thanks for coming on with us. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, Riley Holsinger got an opportunity to talk to cross-country coach Chris Hardie about the PAC Championships here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Hello and welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. The women's cross country team has won its 6th straight President's Athletic Conference Championship. I'm Riley Holsinger. I'm sitting down with the head coach of the women's cross country team, and Chris Hardie. And head coach Hardie here. So you ended up winning your 7th Women's PAC Coach of the Year in 8 years. Just how impressive is it to you that what you're doing in coaching is resulting in not only PAC titles, but also being recognized by the other coaches in the conference?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's to me, it always goes back to the people that are around you. So I think it's important to give recognition to all the coaches that help me every day. And we have 4 distance coaches that are with me every day. But I mean, that's where it gets done. Like, we come up with the workouts and implement them. And so I couldn't do it without Kristen Gallick, Laurel Rush, and the Latimer twins, who basically Katie and Emily. So those 4, and Michelle Cross comes when she can as well. So we have a 5th assistant there. So they do a great job, and the ladies have just done a tremendous job with the pressure over the years to kind of elevate during the big moments. So I give a lot of credit to them. So I just do what I do. Some years it works out, some years it doesn't, and but the people around you kind of make it work. So.
And you mentioned the Latimer twins right there. You've been really lucky with a lot of great runners over the past couple of years. You had them, you had Jolie Gerber, you have Aubrey Winger. What really impresses you about those styles of runners, and how have you been able to land runners of that caliber?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always wonder that too sometimes. I think it's about developing relationships in the recruiting process. All the girls that you mentioned, we got pretty close throughout those months as we were trying to kind of show them what Waynesburg was all about and what our program was about. So there's luck involved, as you know. I mean, the majors help us a lot. Nursing's been great to us. The comm department's been great. So those majors that are really, really impressive here are easy to kind of lure a top athlete to Waynesburg. But those top athletes, they always have something special. There's a gift there that they tend to be your most disciplined athletes, the ones that are working the hardest, and the ones that set lofty goals. And yeah, those girls you mentioned all have done those things. They've just been special and elite, and it's been great to work with them. It's been awesome.
And this past weekend ended up winning the 6th straight PAC championship for this women's cross country team just by 1 single point. How sweet was it, and how nerve-wracking was it for you that you knew this was going to be a close PAC championship?
You were there, so I mean, it was girl after girl. It looked completely tied the whole way through that thing. I saved a piece of paper from the race that I was keeping score at the 3 mile, and we were actually down 4 points. So that's special to me because of the move that they made late in that race. You don't see that type of move. So it was a special group. But I mean, if anybody was around me, Coach Gallick was. I thought we lost. I actually thought we lost by a couple of points. I probably did for about 30 minutes before a couple of the other coaches came up and congratulated us. And I thought, what are you congratulating us for? I thought we lost. I mean, on paper it looked that way. But I also was about 400 meters from the finish. I didn't see what took place. Some of the passes that the girls made at the line were just unreal. So they went out and got it, and I was totally shocked, to be quite honest with you. But we've had 3 of these where it's been 3 points or less, I think, since I've been here. So it's been close a lot of the time. So we're getting used to it, I guess, in a way. But
Head coach Chris Hardie right here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Now, this was a pretty tight championship, just like how we mentioned there. A lot tighter than it was in the championship last spring, and you ended up mentioning it to me in an interview. Your team wasn't as deep this year as it was in years past, but it took a whole combined team effort. So in your opinion, which team is more impressive? The one from last spring that might have been a little bit more top-heavy with its runners, but having to deal with all the COVID challenges, or this team that might not have been as deep and having to deal with a pretty competitive Franciscan team?
Yeah, I think both were challenges that we knew we could overcome, but it was going to take a lot of preparation and a lot of organization from early part of the year. So, COVID was prevalent in both seasons. I think we definitely saw that this year. So I would say that this year was probably a little bit more challenging, which makes it more rewarding when we do pull it out at the end. Just because of the course conditions, COVID was still prevalent. And our depth was a little bit off, but I think the girls definitely did rise to the occasion and made that less of a factor. So probably a little tougher this year. Last year we had Nicole Shelton, Gianna Pugliana. We had some top girls that helped out. So losing those really did hurt us. But But this will be a special year. I think this one was a little bit tougher, and it's a little sweeter now, which is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, definitely a great championship. And that's all the time that we're going to have for today right here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Thank you so much, head coach Chris Hardie, for joining me. And when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, Caleb and Austin will have their top 5 plays of the week.
Now it's time for everybody's favorite segment here on Jacket Sports Weekly. It's time for the top 5 Jacket plays of the week. Let's take a look.
Started off with number 5, men's soccer facing Geneva. Jake Hall blocking a shot right off the dome. Senior defenseman taking the shot off his head right there to prevent a potential goal. Game finished in a 2-2 tie after 2 overtimes.
Number 4, women's soccer, Haley Johnson with the goalkeeper to beat and a couple defenders. Can't she get it in? Yes, she can. Take a look at that once again. She got past the goalkeeper who slid out and mistimed that. Now you got 1, 2, 3, 4 Geneva players, and she decides to take the shot from way outside and puts it in. Nice goal by Haley Johnson. Women's soccer wins big.
Let's keep it in this game. Jackets up 4-1. Haley Johnson once again. 4th goal of the night over the keeper's head. Freshman standout finished the season with 11 goals. And Waynesburg was able to take this one 7-1 off the back of Johnson.
Number 2, women's soccer once again. How about Megan Brisky using her head? That's something you see from Cristiano Ronaldo. Take a look at that corner again. Nice kick into the box. Megan Brisky turns her head and puts it in the back of the goal. Very nice job. 7th goal of the game for the Jackets.
And at number 1, of course, the PAC champion women's cross-country team taking home their 6th straight conference title, narrowly edging out Franciscan to win it all once again for our top spot.
Caleb, an absolutely fantastic performance by the women's cross-country team. 6th straight PAC championship, and just continues to build as a dynasty.
And dynasty is definitely correct. I think this team has an absolutely bright future ahead of them.
Well, for Riley Holsinger, Tyler Zeman, Brock Owens, Joe Venzel, and Caleb Yager, I'm Austin Bechtold. Thanks for tuning in to Jacket Sports Weekly. Have a great day.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.